Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's writing stream for Sonic Ring Bond. I am your host, Joshua Tarwater, and the creator and author of the Sonic Ring Bond AU, a Sonic the Hedgehog AU focusing on my little redesign of Amy Rose, who you'll see right there in the animation. And if this is your first time following one of my streams, let's go ahead and jump right in. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Typically, I'll do an opening paragraph followed by a quick description of the scene, and then tell the story of the scene, and then wrap it up with another paragraph. Don't talk too much during this part, but once I do finish the writing, I'll take about a 15-30 minute break to stretch. And when I come back from that, we'll go over everything in a proofing session of the stream and talk about what my intentions were and probably go off on a tangent or two. For the most part, I'm going to try to avoid talking about the Sonic movies, as my opinions on those don't seem to get very good responses from people. So instead we'll just focus on my AU and go ahead and jump right in. As always, feel free to ask me any questions in the chat and I'll be glad to talk as we go. But for now, just jumping right in. Oh, and one little different thing today. We'll keep music going for a bit doing this one because of what I'll be listening to. This is the theme of Rosy, version A Playful Rascal by Oldham77. You can find it on my Spotify playlist, which I'll go ahead and share the link to you right now. Let me just go grab it. And I'll just drop that here in the chat. And there we go. Will be the second to last song of the playlist, which I cannot play on stream, but should be switching to in this scene. So once again, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see if I recall. In Sonic's world, they don't call them tarot cards, they call them fortune cards. If everybody doesn't mind, I'm going to go take a moment to double check that. Not every day I gotta bring up a comic book to go check something for consistency's sake. It's just taking my computer a while to load the application I need. So we'll get back to that. And now it's up, so I'll just take a moment to find it. we go. I'll just click through it really quickly. And yes, I was right. Fortune cards. That's all the information I needed, so right back to it. Good morning there, yeah. The real salties. Welcome to my writing stream. Mind me for not talking too much. Don't normally talk too much during this part of the stream, but feel free to ask me anything over into chat and I'll respond to it as timely as I can. Just checking my formatting because I'm doing things a little differently on this particular one today. Okay. I'm doing alright myself today. Feeling a little bummed out over some things, but I can push those all aside while I dive and play around in my AU. Hope you're doing alright yourself today. Not familiar with Evernote myself, but I'm kind of all around, I would say, pretty lacking in enough knowledge. I would say I'm probably too absorbed in things I focus on, but hope the learning process is going smoothly. That's pretty cool. Always nice to have a nice selection of notes on hand. In contrast, I write entirely on the fly, make it up as I go. Oh, does sound useful though. gonna take just a quick moment because I actually forgot to do this already. One of the types of notes that I take over the course of writing is I try to structure this around the idea of if I was doing a video game and fitting my narrative around that, which is partly due because Sonic the Hedgehog is originally a video game franchise, and so the idea of telling my narrative in a structure that would fit into a game, in this case the idea that I work with would pretty much be an isometric RPG, which would control kind of like the old BioWare Sonic Chronicles website. Not quite sure how the actual in-game controls were. I'd have to actually look it up. I'm fairly positive it's close to that. And so it would be interspersed with these types of isometric fields where most of the story takes place, but then also 2D stages, more like the classic levels, or if you're less familiar with that, the levels in Sonic Mania. Oh, that's pretty cool. Science fiction usually needs a lot of research to write it well, so I can definitely see why Evernote would be a huge help for you keeping track of your notes. And now I'll be going ahead and muting the music as I switch to the second song that I'll be listening to for the scene. For those wanting to know, it is Kakashi Goto Kyoku by Yukari Hashimoto off of the Kakashi Goto original soundtrack. Still waiting for you to get to the twist in your story. They're real salties. Yes, mine is what would be called a fanfiction. It is a AU built around the ideas of making the rings a more established part of Sonic's world, but also to explore Amy's personality in a different direction than what the games did, based on the idea of what if she had ended up with Sonic's moveset rather than the Pico Pico Hammer. The current set of events is actually set after the ending of Sonic 2, where Sonic 3 and Knuckles technically doesn't end up happening because of changes in history. This is actually the 11th chapter now that I'm working on, and at the prior work, Sonic has already weighed his thoughts on what's going on. Suffice to say, finding himself back in what he considers the past and seeing history unfolding very differently it's kind of bothering him because of different little things that he saw along the ways of coming to realize something was different. I write in Microsoft Word. And there we go. That wraps up this particular chapter. Not too long, but plenty to talk about when I get back from my break. And to that end, I'll get things set up for that real quick. Just gotta make sure I do, because if I'm not careful... Hey, Mega from the 80s, good to see you on the stream today. Was just about to take my break. And so with everything set up, I will leave the stream break and slideshow going. And I will go ahead and, unlike my last stream, remember to go ahead and get the music playing. So thank you everyone for joining so far. Thank you for taking the time to talk as well during this part of the Real Salties. Been enjoying talking to you. Hopefully you'll stay around for the second half as I describe what I'll be, or what I was thinking of as I wrote the scene. A little bit to cover, and my breaks usually take about 15 to 30 minutes, so I will be back. And thank you again for joining me thus far. Hope to see everyone after the break. And I am back, everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed the break. And let's see here, where to begin. As I said, welcome back. I'm Joshua Tarwater, your host for this writing stream, which is set in the AU Sonic Ring Bond, which is my creation, an AU focused on making the rings a more regular part of the world, and a place to explore Amy's character in a different light. And with this particular episode, this particular chapter more precisely, finally getting around to introducing her into the story. I avoid saying too much about her early on, and try to let her speak more so for her actions. Before we dive in too much though, just a quick breakdown to give everybody an idea of what I do and how this works. If I bring up the right screens. Sometimes that happens to me. I bounce all over the place and lose track of what I'm doing. Is for my writing streams, for those of you just joining me for the first time, or skipping ahead on the YouTube videos. My writing streams are divided into two parts. The first part, I write the scene, and pretty much it all comes from a make it up as I go approach. I have ideas for what I want to do, but it's not really something I particularly plan out, and I just let the characters carry it on based off what I throw at them in the plot, and what I'm hoping I can steer them towards to do. So with today's scene, I was actually planning originally on kind of having two events happen in it, but that kind of goes against the approach I've been having with Sonic Ring Bond for writing this new take on my AUN story here in 2022, where the idea is to let's see here, how to best describe it. Focus on just one scene a chapter, as that I think allows for more breathing room for the characters, and allows my story to be more expansive. Which is kind of an interesting approach, since part of the idea behind it is writing my story as if its narrative is built around a game structure. And so it leaves a few challenges, but nothing we can't tackle. And so we're going to go ahead and jump in. And things are a little different with this scene from how you would normally see it. Normally I would have an opening paragraph before the zone title block, which would define the idea behind the scene, and then the scene would pick up itself after the title block, to which I'll then have an ending title block, and with a bit of a wrap-up paragraph after that. A little different in structure today, as this is finally the introduction of Rosy and Tempest, who are for the most part the main characters of the AU, even more though than Sonic, who is a main character, but his role will be more ancillary. Based off what he's doing and what's going on in the world, his actions may or may not cross paths with these guys, but they will always be affecting the overall story. And naturally, this is a Son Amy AU, so I do have to get to that point as well of him and Amy interacting more. Though for the case of the AU, instead of calling her Amy, which I will leave exclusively to Sonic to call her, and there are reasons for that, I'm going to have everybody calling her Rosy, but we'll cover the differences on that at another stream, unless I go off on a tangent later, which is something I'll warn you about now. I have a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog opinions, some based off preference, some based off of the facts that have come from the creators in interviews, and some just from experience with what I've seen with the IP. Now then, as I start, so I don't have a normal opening paragraph, and I actually put the main title just before the title block. The idea behind it again is that this is the introduction of Rosy and Tempest proper into story. This is where their stories begin, and where the main AU story really begins. The prior 10 chapters were literally all prologue, setting up the world and the ideas behind it, as well as the problems going on. And so now we are properly here at the beginning of the story. And though I wasn't planning on doing this particular aspect of the storytelling, it felt appropriate, as the whole idea of this opening scene is heavily inspired by Mawadu Penguin Drum, which is one of the reasons that it starts with the word destiny. Destiny is literally the first word in the script of Mawadu Penguin Drum, and so it's kind of a big tribute there to Ikehata Sensei. Most people, I believe, are more familiar with his work on Revolutionary Girl Utena than they are Mawadu Penguin Drum, and he's got plenty of other works, and even people who have worked under him have done works that are inspired by him. And suffice to say, his particular style very much inspires me, and it's one of the reasons that you see me do this structure of a sentence with single sentence paragraphs, is that it drops a certain amount of information and then moves on. In this case, normally I keep that description separate from any type of narration or dialogue from the characters. But again, this is kind of a big reference to the opening episode of Mawadu Penguin Drum. Just that opening scene with Himari asleep in bed. And so I take the time with it to instead have it as Rosy who's talking about destiny and fate, and I particularly distinguish the two. And again, I have reasons for that. And so I get this narration by Rosy, which you'll always see in italics surrounded by tildes. And then I have these quick sentences which just describe the scene. And so it's kind of a, I would say almost jarring mix of the two ideas. But the idea here is to build up Rosy's character. And since she is just Amy Rose, but looking at her in a different light, I am building backwards to her original foundation that she's built on, which is pretty much a Genki girl, and is describable as her having limitless energy, good cheer, and optimism, which are the three things that she absolutely needs for her lifestyle of pursuing Sonic the Hedgehog, who will never look back at her as he's always looking forward to his next adventure and challenge. And this Genki Girl foundation, this optimism, cheerfulness, and energy, you don't really see it anymore anywhere in the IP. About the only places that you really still see it come through is in the Tyson Hess animated shorts. So Sonic Mania Adventures Episode 6 and Team Sonic Racing Overdrive Episode 1. You see a lot of Amy's character in those places. Now, right now, I'm just establishing her Genki Girl foundation at this point in the scene. And so, remind me a moment as I take a moment to read through it, make sure I don't have any grammar or spelling mistakes or any missing ideas. And right from the get-go, though, as I go into that, one of the big things again that I want to focus on with Rosy as a whole, and it's something a lot of people talk about, is Amy's attraction to the mystical. and that's based off of her hobby of fortune telling. And it's kind of a problem that the fan base has in general, is they project the characters' hobbies as their characters. Though in Amy's case, it's a lot more convoluted. I mean, I wrote an 11,000 word essay on what I think about when I write her character, so there is a lot in mind. Hopefully I can actually act on all of those thoughts, but we'll see. But I do, for reasons of my plot, do take the time to put her fortune teller front and center. Make it a part of her character, make it a part of the story, as it does give her a distinct perspective on the world and what's going on in it. If Knuckles is ancient culture, Tails is technology, and Sonic is nature, Amy is like Tikal and affiliated with the gods, the spirits, and all that type of stuff. And as such, this puts us in a position of where, since my AU's main antagonist is a god, putting this part of her character at the fore, I feel is both important, but I also don't want it to be overwhelming. And so from there, most of this opening is again just kind of giving actions to describe both the casual and recklessness of her character, as well as the energy and playfulness that she exudes. And so just little things throughout this, from her hopping and dropping and kicking the garment around, and in a playful way, her tail and arms bursting out of the rest of the garment. It shows her both struggling but having fun with the message she gets herself into. It's just little things like that, and again, tossing the socks into the air. Recklessness. Why, she also describes how destiny binds people together and intertwines them. But also, as to look at Amy in a different light from how she developed, to consider the idea of going back to her roots. It's not just a displacement in time. I have to make sure that I actively remove the Amy everyone knows, and that's where the amnesia subplot comes from, is that cutting off of the Amy everyone knows. And that being the said, it's why I tie in with the idea of her being Sonic's one and only lover as her destiny, and it's all that she remembers of being her. And part of the reason for this is Amy was literally created to both be a girl in the franchise and Sonic's girlfriend. It's literally what she exists for. And to that end, her entire character is at once shaped around Sonic, but also pretty much a direct clone of Sonic. It's just with she has a very different foundation, which makes that whole character structure appear very differently from Sonic's. And then, of course, you have the surface level traits, which all of that runs through. One of the most important aspects of Amy's character being a certain degree of childishness, which kind of filters everything else even further before it interacts with those surface level traits at first. This is where her naivety and appearance of innocence comes from. And then as I wrap up and I switch the attention from Rosy to Tempest, who is my rather distinct OC, that's when I take the time to go ahead and put in the title again. As we shift from Rosy to Tempest, introduce the zone, and part of the idea from that is by putting Amy or Rosy before everything else, I introduce her as the main character of the AU. This is all about her, it's her story and what she sees. But as I move away from that, and as the synopsis for this episode says, this is where Tempest's story starts. And so as I go into the zone, it's Tempest who we'll be starting with. And as such, it's why I move away from Rosy's theme to a more emotional one to build up the idea of who Tempest is. What is his character? Where is he from? What does the world mean to him? But again, it's still Rosy, but I remove a lot of her narration as I take a moment to go through my typical short sentences. Now, these are a bit more detailed than I prefer them to be, but they still follow the idea that it's just enough information to stimulate the imagination of my writers, but in short bursts and my readers, but in short bursts and constantly moving the attention from one thing to another thing, one thing to another thing, and letting that picture just form in everyone's mind. And I don't go into too much detail because I feel it's better to let the reader fill it in themselves. And now I switch from Destiny to Fate, and this is where the distinction really starts to be brought into the story. And one of the things I want to cover here is that her tail stops wagging. And part of the idea behind this is I used the wagging tail on Rosy, inspired originally by fan art. It has made its way slowly into Amy's actual character. You'll see it in the IDW comics. But I like to use it as a measure of her excitement. And so if you see it stop and she herself isn't animated, it should give you an idea onto her emotional state, even in spite of her bubbly demeanor and her limitless energy, good cheer, and optimism. Her tail is a much better barometer to what she's feeling versus her actions. And so as such, I gotta make sure as the writer, I never cut the tail out or its importance to the story. And so again, go into the ideas of what she thinks about the island and fate, and how I take the time to distinguish the two, and also position her in a way to where one can believe that she will fight the gods and fate, even if she believes in destiny and following it. And with this little thing, I just take a little bit more time to finish describing her in my AU. Is one of the things that I do with my AU and the whole situation of what's going on, which will be explained at a much later time, is Rosy is much, much closer to Sonic in age than Amy should be at the point of time that's just after Sonic 2. And there are reasons for that, part of it being Sonic's fault, but I'll explain that later on as well. But as a result, it ends up with Rosie not even really being sure of her own self either. And one of the things that you'll hear me talk about a lot with Amy as a character is her brattiness. And her brattiness, usually when it manifests, is it's going along with her frustration. And when she's getting frustrated, she starts to get bratty and entitled. And this starts what is typically a karmic loop for her. And so as this karmic loop begins, her brattiness and entitlement eventually have to hit a karmic action to return her back to who she is foundationally. If it does not happen, she starts to become an obnoxious character. And it's one of the reasons why, for Rosy, aside from just the idea of how would she have gone without the Pico Pico Hammer, it's important that I keep the Pico Pico Hammer away from her, as it is a tool that she is able to use to gain karmic immunity and reach into that obnoxiousness that can make her very unbearable for a lot of people. And so to me, it's very important to take away tools from her that allows her to become obnoxious. And so as such, you'll see these moments of brattiness and frustration, and if there isn't a karmic event, or it's not particularly bad of her, then more often than not, you won't see me linger on it too long, and I'll let her loop back around to where she should be. In this case, the karma I would say is that her frustration still doesn't stop her from being reminded of what her responsibilities are for the day. And so she chooses to go and fulfill them, which allows the karma to fade away cleanly, and the moment of brattiness and entitlement, the frustration, to never grow out of control, to need to complete the complete loop. And this allows her to take a moment of kindness and present it to Tempest. I will explain next chapter, which will be next weekend, why exactly she's calling him Tempest already. If he's passed out and she hasn't met him yet, there are plenty of reasons for that. Well, it's really just one primary reason, and that will be covered in next week's chapter. And one of the other things I take the time to do is not just show her kindness, but I also take the time to show her own love of adventure, which is a thing that a lot of people miss in Amy's character, which is really weird to me, because a lot of people know Amy's character starting at the beginning of Sonic Adventure. And literally at the beginning of her own story, she's lamenting the absence of Sonic because her life is boring without the excitement and adventure he brings. And so this already tells us out of the gate she's an adventure lover, and I want to make sure to put that into the story now, that she loves adventure. And as I move on from there, the idea is to continue to convey the energy she has and the playfulness she has. And at this point, again, showing that concern and her willingness to care for other. And then just a little bit of extra content. And the introduction of Nana the Hen, who we'll see more of in the next chapter as well. And the idea is to start generally having Rosy moving away from Tempest. I'm using this as the catalyst for him waking. And there's a lot of parallels I'm putting in here. I'm not going to overly define them at this point, but I'll let you know that they're there and wonder if you'll see what I'm paralleling. But I also take the time during this particular part to squeeze in that chance to call her a rascal. Rosy the Rascal is Amy's original nickname, and it tells us a tremendous amount about her character and the type of role that she should have in the series. It's not the direction she went, and little surprise that her nickname was dropped. To me, though, it's part of how I will explore her in a different light, as rascals are known to get into and cause trouble for their own amusement. Amy, however, is good cheer, optimistic, kind, and this means she's going to bring this about in a way that's not just fun for her, but that she believes will be fun for everyone else as well. She is a troublemaker, and I really want to play into that aspect of her character. It's one of the reasons why I have a character like Tempest put into the story. As it gives her someone to interact with that this rascally aspect of hers will bounce off of. And welcome to the chat, Lord Cant, or Lord Canty. And yes, actually in Sonic the Fighters, when AM2 gives it to her, the idea that they had is that a cute girl like her hitting people with her fists would not really be a good image. But they still wanted to keep the tomboy aspect of her character, which a lot of people forget that she has. And so they gave her this hammer so she could partake in the fights, even though she's more than glad to, like everyone else, grab Espio's tongue or take Fang's gun and shoot him in the face with it. But those also still play into her rascally nature, and the whole thing with the Pico Pico hammer when it was originally introduced is it's literally still just a Japanese toy for which it's named, which is a Pico hammer. I forget the exact full name of it, but Pico is actually the sound that it makes. That's the way that the Japanese write out the sound, because it's just a squeaky toy hammer. And as a result, because she has these big smiling expressions while she's doing her attacks and motions, you get this air that she's just having massive amounts of fun. And then you turn around, and when she gets hit, you see her bratty side come to the fore, and that's part of where I get the idea of her brattiness has to go with her frustration but be hit by a wall of karma, is that balances her out and keeps her both fun and endearing, but also avoids her from getting overwhelmed by her brattiness. And in time, yes, the whole idea of her being able to go toe to toe with characters like Knuckles with a toy hammer as an absolute powerhouse, it's a certain absurdity which delves into the idea that her bratty entitlement became a weapon and it gave her tremendous amounts of power. But at the same time, we end up losing the sweet, cheerful girl who just wants to enjoy the adventure she has while chasing Sonic and doing her best to partake in his life with him. And so, to me, the exclusion of the hammer it's not just because of the other ideas I had when I redesigned Amy in the first place, or I should say tried my hand at doing a redesign for her, but as I went into writing a story for her and putting her into a story, it became very clear to me, even with all of my other biases and research on her character, how important it is to keep the hammer away from her. Because the moment you give it to her, it lets her chase away her karma, and this gives her a power and entitlement which is very dangerous and leads to lots of mishandling of her character, to where, yes, you're right, Lord Canty, she becomes the hammer. And a lot of people I've talked to, including Amy fans, will argue that the Pico Pico hammer is as important to her character as Tails and Knuckles' namesakes. And that, in my own opinion, undermines her character because it says instead of Amy Rose, a name that can be broken down to mean beloved flower of love, which is her relationship with Sonic, or Rosy the Rascal, which can be broken down to mean optimistic and cheerful troublemaker, which is her primary role in the franchise before she receives the Pico Pico hammer. The Pico Pico hammer is joke toy. That's literally all it is. Joke toy that hits people who are being dumb. And so she at once becomes a joke, a toy, and something used to keep the rest of the cast from having fun. Which is anything but what her character should be, and it's part of the reason she gets excluded so much. Because whether one thinks about it or not, the ideas behind the point of this toy are going to be in the minds of the controllers of the franchise, which is Sega of Japan. And so all this Japanese culture influences her on a subconscious level. Whereas here in the West, we see the hammer not as a squeaky toy, but as a warhammer, a weapon of war. She's a great warrior. She's got to be able to destroy anything when she swings this hammer. And so she's a great warrior squeaky toy joke. And yes, people who are familiar with Fleetway, and even people who are familiar with Archie, when Sonic Adventure came out, it was a shocking wake up call for a lot of Sonic fans, because as it turns out, the people who were making the games, and welcome to the stream, Frasslot. Oh, cool. Very awesome to have someone from Argentina join the stream. That's pretty awesome. Usually, most of my viewers are limited to the US and uh, the UK, actually, so really cool to get somebody from Argentina in. I hope I don't talk too rapidly. Ah, well, I hope you're getting some good advice to keep your mental health in the right direction and good. We could all definitely use a lot more of that. Good mental health is underappreciated. Which is actually one of Amy's other roles. Is one of Amy's roles, it's literally in her Sonic Channel profile, is she's the mood maker. Her job is literally to keep everybody else's spirits up rather than letting them dwell on whatever's wrong. And she's going to do that in any ways possible, both through her Genki Girl energy, good cheer and optimism, but also through the fact that she's supposed to be a rascal. She's a troublemaker. She's going to tease and pump these people up by getting them believing in themselves and relying on the infectiousness of her own personality. She is a character who will smile always, and smiles for the most part are infectious. And so why Genki girls can typically be annoying over-energetic joke characters, there's a lot that can be genuine with Amy, and it gets left out a lot. And it's not really a surprise, because a lot of where the strengths of Amy's characters lie significantly more with a narrative than it does in gameplay. And to that degree, it's why I'm more than happy to write in AU and to re-explore Amy's characters and her traits in a light to where she never developed into the Pico Pico warrior. Yeah, it's definitely not often that the tarot cards are recognized, but I'm not overly surprised because it is originally introduced as a hobby, even if it's simultaneously what leads her to go on her first adventure, her first big adventure, and actually meet Sonic. And it's one of the things that's always bothered me about Amy, is a lot of Amy fans like to pump her up and say she's the normal character of the group. She's awesome because she's normal and she works hard to keep up with these superpowered characters. Except the thing is, when you look back at Sonic CD, Amy literally by herself travels to Never Lake, which, if you go by the Japanese manual, at least the translations of it, Never Lake, 11 months out of the year, is a desolate wasteland. It is only a verdant lake when Little Planet appears. All those blue waters, green grass, bouncing flowers. Exactly. This inexperienced adventurer went out in her own love of adventure and to go fulfill this destiny she knew she had, hoping it was Sonic. She had no guarantee it was Sonic. She simply hoped it was. All she knew is that it was a destined encounter, and she hoped it was Sonic. And so she gets to Never Lake by herself. Doesn't ask any help that we know of, but it gets better. Because if you've played the game, and it was my second Sonic game, I grew up with that game more so than the Death Egg Saga, and it left a far, far, far bigger impact on me. As such, a lot of people who are gushing about the Sonic movies and the whole Sonic Tails Knuckles trio, you can usually trace their background either to being Sonic Heroes fans or Death Egg Saga fans. Whereas me, I'm a Sonic CD fan. And so that gives me a very unusual outlook on things. But where it gets better with Amy is not only does she get to Never Lake by herself, not only does she go out there by herself, but Sonic's first encounter with her is not at Never Lake. It's in Palm Tree Panic. He's literally up on Little Planet when he meets her for the first time. Sonic gets up onto Little Planet by literally running up the chain that Eggman has it tethered down with. It's the only way we know for anybody to be able to get up there. So not only did Amy follow the information from tarot cards, which wasn't even clear, and when way too much enthusiasm, that Genki Girl Foundation of hers, goes all the way out to a wasteland where a legend implies it may not be a wasteland when she gets there, to meet who knows who. She gets there, sees a planet in the sky, and somehow gets herself up onto it. But the best parts are, not only does she manage that, even after Sonic dusts her at the end of Palm Tree Panic Act 1, she still beats him to Collision Chaos. And she catches up with him through Metallic Madness, which is an absolute Eggman death trap to kill Sonic. And she makes it through that. No matter how you break it down, she is under no circumstances the normal character a lot of people try to make her out to be. And the only thing she really lacks is Sonic speed. And that's one of the things in my AU that I plan on addressing. If you've ever seen any of my prior works in the AU, I typically start the story with her already having it. I usually avoid the actual point in the story to where she gets sonic speed. This time around, because it's a major plot point for me, I'll actually be covering it. So where we are in this first chapter of her appearing in the story and being called Rosy, she does not have sonic speed yet. She'll get that though, well before this episode's out. But Rosy's not the only thing going on in this scene. And the imagery I was going with where I left off was to get Rosy to move away from Tempest. And the whole idea is as she gets further away from him, he reaches for her. And that's what wakes up Tempest, who is an OC. A lot of his point as an OC, despite the fact that he's totally head over heels for her, totally in love with her, jealous of Sonic, and would do anything for her. He is a character that I've created to explore the Son-Amy dynamic from a different point of view. Because one of the weird things about Amy that a lot of people don't really pay attention to, and it's something I've always found fascinating, the first way I ever explained it myself is that Amy around Sonic is a lot like a puppy. When she first sees him in any situation, she is overwhelmed by her own energy, and she just immediately acts on it because it's Sonic, and that's all that matters to her. It's Sonic. She's head over heels for him. She loves him with all her heart. She'd do anything for him, and she has this excitement for him as well. And so she hits him like a Mack truck. More than Sonic can handle. Unlike movie Sonic, game Sonic is not very touchy-feely at all. He's a very aloof and distant character, and prefers to have his personal space respected. For the most part, he's got no problem disrespecting other people's personal space, but he likes having his own personal space respected, and the fact that, according to both one of his creators and one of Amy's creators, Naoto Oshima, he does also like Amy, but he's got the heart of a boy. And so this immaturity in him makes it very difficult for him to know how to deal with Amy. And it's what results in a lot of the fun between the two of them when they tease and fluster each other, combined with their own competitiveness, and that Sonic is technically Amy's primary rival. She competes against him to be able to partake in his lifestyle. And that is by definition a rival. It's a one-sided rivalry, but it is a rivalry. And so in a way, Sonic is also a motivation and an inspiration to Amy. And that's on top of the fact that she's a hedgehog adventurer who loves to travel, meet new people, and help them, which is exactly what Sonic does. And it's why I say a lot of the times Amy is a clone of Sonic, but that's only in character structure, because she has a very different foundation. That character structure is represented differently, and that's before it's put through her filter of childishness, which is something which has been removed from her character over the last decade or so. And, that's partly because of people demanding that Amy mature. And, some people were getting to the point that they wanted her to have the maturity of a military general slash grandmother who was still in active service and whose every actions balanced the lives of thousands of soldiers. And it's like, holy cow, she's a kid. Let her have her fun. Let her be the Genki girl that she is, and let her chase her dreams. That's one of the other things Amy is. She is a dream chaser. She chases an impossible dream and doesn't give up, letting it shape and inspire her in the best ways possible. She's a very motivational character. And that's one of the other reasons I want to take the character of my OC here, Tempest Black, is he's someone who she will be able to motivate, inspire, bring her mood maker traits to the fore and interact with. And now a lot of people, myself included, could say that Tails very much can fall into that role as well. It's why I am a strong believer of the Sonic Tails Amy triangle, is because there's a dynamic between those three which rolls and bounces off of each other, not just naturally and in the way that a group of boys is a group of boys, but in the fact that they both temper each other but also counter each other's weaknesses. Tails' confidence isn't just countered by Sonic by being a motivation, it's countered by Amy by being an encouraging voice who believes in pretty much everyone. On the other hand, Amy's immaturity and impulsiveness is countered by Tails' rationale and cautiousness, and they balance each other out. And in them both being inspired by Sonic is a bonding point that allows them to pursue Sonic. And where they bounce off of Sonic is Sonic, outside of movie Sonic, is a very emotionally cut off person. But Tails brings out Sonic's caring side, that big brother that people love him being into Tails' relationship. Whereas Amy affects the romantic side of his heart, and this makes him unnervous and it shows his insecurities and grounds him from being the distant, aloof, on a pedestal larger than life figure that he's typically presented as. And the problem with a character like, say, Knuckles in this grouping is Knuckles is a great character for the boys will be boys. We have our rhythm, we have our way of life, and we all have each other's backs. The problem is at the end of the day, he's a second Tails. He's a brother to Sonic, and Sonic's going to treat him like a brother. But because he's older and more sure of himself and confident, Sonic has no problem knocking him down a peg so he doesn't get arrogant. Whereas Knuckles' own brashness and headstrongness can balance Sonic back out by keeping Sonic's cockiness and witty mouth having to deal with the karma of being too impertinent, too cheeky. But it still leaves Sonic's vulnerabilities and insecurities missing, whereas Amy directly steps right into that hole. And she really brings out another side of Sonic that the boys don't, simply through the nature of being a romantic love interest. And she's also so friendly that she also addresses Knuckles' own sense of isolation, just because being the Genki girl she is, she's not going to ignore him. He's there. She's going to talk to him. Combine that with Knuckles' own weakness around girls, and you get this very comical situation, which is also sweet and genuine, as Amy just wants to help and be his friend. They really are a great group of characters. Unfortunately, I don't believe Amy actually fits into movies at all, simply because a lot of the reason she follows Sonic is because she's an adventurer who's inspired by his adventuring and yearns to be a part of his adventures. But movie Sonic's not an adventurer. He's the kid at the Wachowskis who goes out and saves the world on occasion. That spark and that love of adventure they haven't put in him yet, and so there's no reason for Amy to interact with him as she is. I mean, one could go, well, you can always circle back to the tarot cards. They tell her they're destined lovers, and she believes in the cards no matter what. And so, as such, you can bring her in that way, but elevating her past a nuisance and also keeping her character intact, it would be easier to just write her as a completely different character. The other thing is, though, is that a lot of her roles are actually covered by Tom and Maddie Wachowski. They take care of exposing Sonic's sensitive side. They take care of exposing his vulnerabilities, his insecurities. They cover all of that by being surrogate parents and exploiting the loneliness that movie Sonic suffered from, as he's not a loner like game Sonic is. And so a lot of the purposes that Amy has, they're already taken up in the movies. It's kind of the same argument that a lot of people will make against bringing the Freedom Fighters into the games, is that the Freedom Fighters were originally invented with the sole idea of filling out narrative roles, because just Sonic vs. Eggman doesn't really provide a lot of context to work with. And that doesn't matter if you completely disregard the Japanese story, or Japanese side of the story, for the DIC story, which is what Sega of America and Archie did. And the reason I say that is a lot of people argue, but the Sonic Bible. The reason not the Sonic Bible is DIC did not follow the Sonic Bible. The Sonic Bible has a very particular background for Sonic, and it has nothing to do with Princess Sally Acorn. The Fleetway comics follow the Sonic Bible from Sega of America, though there's no sign of Sonic siblings. But DIC gave Sonic an even different background yet, which is he grew up in Knothole, the Kingdom of Acorn. He was best friends with Sally as kids, and they grew up together, and then Robotnik made a mess of everything. The problem is Yuji Naka and the guys at Sega of Japan, who created Sonic, they had a completely different story in mind, and as they were the ones making the games, not Sega of America, Sega of America's job was to just market and sell the games. None of that was there, and it's one of the reasons it was very, very jarring for American fans come Sonic Adventure, is for years they were exposed to one of the worst false advertising campaigns you'll ever see. One that still boggles my mind Sega of America was never in legal trouble for. And as a result, though, if you respect the game material, no, the Freedom Fighters don't belong. And it's why me personally, when I look at the movies, and I want to respect the movies regardless of my personal opinions on them, and the structure of the movies, at this point in time, I don't think Amy fits in a way that's true to her. And while there's ways to work her in, ultimately, she's going to have to displace other characters to fit. Unless you write a completely new character in Amy's skin, like Sonic Boom did. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your intention. But as a fan of Amy since Sonic CD debuted back in 1993, a fan of Amy who was upset when she was redesigned for Sonic Adventure, a fan of Amy who did not like what Sonic X did to her character, and a fan of Amy who has written countless tirades about her character, has recently written an 11,000 plus word essay, which ended up being a 250 tweet thread on Twitter. Not the best way to post it, but it worked out for what I needed to do. And it's reached a few people in the right ways, not just the people who think it's too long and have to come in and put derisive comments on it. But to me, it would be very disappointing to see an Amy who's just not Amy. And that's still my problem with Movie Sonic. They told us Movie Sonic was going to grow up into who Game Sonic was. Well, the thing is, Game Sonic has been Game Sonic since before the original game in 1991. He was Game Sonic long before he ever met Tails. He was Game Sonic long before he ever met Knuckles. And so, Movie Sonic has already met Tails and Knuckles. And he's yet to reach the maturity of Game Sonic. And no less, he still doesn't even have a spark leading to his love of adventure after 2 movies. And so the idea that he's still... Oh, I'm glad you had the time to read it and enjoyed it. It was a bit long. Thank you very much for that, Lord Canty. But as such, and also just the fact that movie Sonic has very different motivations. Game Sonic, he does not have a motivation to be a hero. His heroics come from a combination of his selfishness and his kindness, and his willingness to put his own life on the line to resolve these issues which bother him. And so that makes him a hero through action, but he is not a hero in mind, even though he recognizes that he's perceived as a hero. And you see that self-recognition in Sonic and the Black Knight, one of the best portrayals of Sonic as a character, and he literally ends a world. If that doesn't give one an idea that Sonic is not a hero, and thus make it very, very clear the difference in motivation with his movie counterpart, who wants to be a hero, who wants to do Longclaw proud, who wants to be able to hold his head up high and know he did the right thing and helped people. Those are two very different characters, and I can never see movie Sonic, immature and cliche, out of control teenager that he is, under no circumstances could I actually see him having the type of immaturity necessary to give up on all of that just to pursue whatever next adventure and challenge catches his eye. That is a completely different type of immaturity from the immaturity that he has. And the maturity that he has directly goes against that. To become a character like Game Sonic would actually be to throw out the character development that Movie Sonic has. And much as I prefer Game Sonic, as I don't like the personality of Movie Sonic, the cliched out of control teenager, I do again try to respect what I'm looking at, and when I study it, he's so different and it has to be acknowledged. And because he's so different, which is partly because of the setting he's in, which makes him tremendously different because it's a tremendously different setting. And it's alright to like Movie Sonic, don't get me wrong on that. However, to think he can become Game Sonic, I think is disrespecting him. It's underselling the character that Movie Sonic is. Because to become a vagabond drifter who's happy in his own isolation and just seeing whatever adventures and challenges he can find, that's completely against his character development. And again, that's also fine. Even Takashi Iizuka of Sonic Team, or I should say Sega really, has said Movie Sonic and Game Sonic are not the same character. This should be easy to accept for Sonic fans, because the games are already defined as far back as Archie, as a different universe from the comics universe. Sonic has had a multiverse this long, and now we also know with Sonic Prime coming, that again we have a Sonic multiverse, though in this case it's being called a Shatterverse, which should imply that Sonic does something which shatters his universe and he's got countless reflections of all his friends, and he's got to figure out how to undo the mess he made, while simultaneously learning things about his friends through this Shatterverse experience he would have never known because of his aloof and distant lifestyle. And so it is an opportunity to bring this sense of family and to rein in the aloofness of his character to make Game Sonic more like Movie Sonic, and that would be a growth of his character, even if it's a total shift of direction from his character purpose, which is a mascot character who can be used again and again and again without need of a growth arc. And welcome to the chat, low-key Opsbro. Pretty much. The primary idea behind multiverses is you want Spider-Man in a black costume, but it's not Venom, or you want a Venom Peter Parker, but you can't mess up the 616 Peter Parker. Okay, well, we got universe 662, and in this universe, Peter never got rid of the Venom suit, and him and the symbiote came to an agreement which benefited both, and so you have a Spider-Man Venom. And now you can sell these toys of good Venom Peter Parker. And so multiversing is ideally to sell toys, 100%. And Sonic is, despite how it's written as an easy to absorb as a for everyone franchise, it is a children's franchise. One of the earliest ideas behind the franchise, though the inspiration for Sonic's character has never really changed, which is one of the reasons why Sonic as an immature teenager is kind of unfitting, is if anybody's familiar with Chuck Yeager, he's credited as the first man to break the sound barrier in a jet, which is a pretty big deal. He's actually the naming inspiration for Uncle Chuck from the DIC and Archie works, but he actually, not him specifically, but the pilot who broke the sound barrier before him is the inspiration for a fictional character, or for a fictional pilot, who Sonic himself is based off of. This particular story works like this, and Yasuhara-san and Oshima-san covered this at a game development conference where they were teaching at a seminar. I believe it was in Germany? If it was in Germany, it was somewhere in the Netherlands. And they were talking about a lot of the early concepts on Sonic, and as they had shifted away from some of the ideas, what they started leaning into was the idea that Sonic was a children's book character who was based on the husband, a pilot from World War II, who was known as Hedgehog because of his spiky hair. Sonic himself was literally a motive, the Sonic 1 title ring that he pops out of and shakes his finger at, was literally the symbol on the back of the pilot jacket, or bomber jacket, which, when you look at that ring and the wings on it, that's a very common design for the motifs on bomber jackets. Except what made this special is because Sonic was the pilot was known as Hedgehog, Sonic was a hedgehog put into this logo. And so he was a children's book character that this lady character created based on her husband, a pilot nicknamed Hedgehog. And he is based on the pilot that broke the sound barrier before Chuck Yeager. The reason he doesn't get credit for it, and another Sonic origin story is based off this event, is because his plane exploded when he broke the sound barrier. He did not survive it. And so that's effectively who Sonic's based off of. He's based off of World War II dogfighters. If you want a really good idea of what type of people World War II dogfighters are, as well as the age of adventure and biplane era that Sonic's imagery is heavily referential to, I recommend the Studio Ghibli movie Porco Rosso, and I also recommend movies like The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser, and of course the Indiana Jones franchise. And you'll get a very good idea on why Sonic is so unnaturally mature for his age, is because he's based off these adventurers from this time era between World War I and World War II, but defined by the events of what came after World War II. And it makes Sonic a very, very nuanced and interesting character. It's part of why he's so aloof. Because consider how war vets are when they come home after wars. They're distant. Their minds are still in the battlefields. They don't adjust to regular society, and society doesn't know what to do with them. Sonic, having the freedom that he has as the hedgehog that he is, and having his speed and his own plane, just continues the life of adventure that existed before World War II started. And this is where a bit of his immaturity comes from, but also, again, that distant aloofness, which makes Sonic just a very unusual character who has no problem just letting people live their lives the way they do, unless they're hurting other people. Because again, that's really all war vets want when they come home from war, is to be allowed to be themselves. It's literally what they fight for, is the right for the people at home to keep being themselves, and yet they're not even allowed to have that, both because of the traumas of war, and because when they get home, nobody can see them as anything but a soldier. They are dehumanized for fighting for the very thing that everyone else considers normal. And it's kind of awful. But Sonic, you can actually trace his roots into that type of mentality. And so, there's one of the reasons why one of the ways to describe Sonic, and a common problem of war vets, especially after the Vietnam War. Anybody want a good example of that? Watch the movie Rambo First Blood. And I don't mean the one where he's in the jungles shooting everybody. I mean the original Rambo movie, where he's just a vagabond, a word used to describe Sonic, who walks into a small town, just wants to get something to eat before he continues on the road, and ends up in a small war with the sheriff of the town. It's rather unsettling, disappointing in how heartless and cruel people can be to the people who put their lives on the line so they can keep living like that. And again, it's why to me, seeing Sonic as an immature kid, it's very jarring. And it's very not Sonic because it doesn't trace back to his origins as a character and the ideas and the realities which lead to the imagery that give birth to the ideas that form Sonic. And so it's kind of interesting because Amy's a Sonic clone in personality, or at least in character structure, but with a different foundation, her being a Yankee girl. You can usually explore this immaturity of Sonic through use of Amy. And again, that's another reason why I don't feel like she works in the movies, is his immaturity is already an established part of his character, and it's explored through the Wachowskis, and the fact that they give him a secure and safe place to be immature. And so while it's a different form of exploring Sonic's immaturity, it is an exploration of his immaturity which leaves out a need or a place for Amy. Which is something I was observing as I've written for ideas for my AU in the past with Amy, is that even with as much as she loves Sonic and just partaking in adventures with him, she needs more people to interact with just Sonic to round her out. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to restart my AU and do a fresh story going into this year. And one of the reasons that I created Tempest is due to his love for Amy, able to approach the ideas that for as much as Amy daydreams of these huge romantic gestures, the over-the-top Hollywood nonsense, Sonic just putting his hand on her hand overwhelms her. It totally blows her mind. And there are two reasons that this happens. Much as I criticize Ian Flynn for his character writing, as he usually puts character behind plot, so the characters get lost, he did nail that in IDW issue 2, when Amy says she loves Sonic for who he is, period. This means one of the things that she knows about Sonic is he does not respond well to romantic gestures or public displays of affection. And you can again find this in the earliest aspects of Sonic. Just do research on the character Madonna, who was Sonic's prototype girlfriend. She was chopped off at the ankles by Sega of America, particularly by a lady who claims herself to be the mother of Sonic the Hedgehog, even though the majority of her ideas were rejected from the character. Her cuts were kept, her ideas were not. And so while a lot of Madonna's personality was inherited by Amy, Amy still is different from her, and one of the things, though, that Amy did carry was the love of romance and love of Sonic. And you see this in this concept art, is you see Madonna daydreaming about Sonic, and Sonic is covered in lipstick marks. But Sonic's reaction isn't the dopey, droopy-eyed, wobbly knees, I'm gonna fall over with a weird grin on my face from the Archie comics when involved with Sally. He's ticked off. He's angry. He's yelling. He's livid. He's annoyed. And this tells you he does not like public displays of affection. He does not do well with receiving romantic affection, even if he has feelings in turn. Because remember, Madonna was considered Sonic's girlfriend. Amy was created as Sonic's girlfriend. It is never said Amy is not. It is simply said no one knows how Sonic feels about Amy. Now again, Oshima-san, co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, one of the party who created Amy, led by Kazuyuki Hoshino-san, he said if Sonic matured, instead of having his eternal boy's heart, he would pick Amy. And this tells us right out, even Yuji Naka has said that Sonic likely has feelings for Amy, but he cannot imagine Sonic getting married, settling down, and having kids. He personally perceives it as Sonic will always be running to the next adventure, and Amy will always be chasing after him. That is the dynamic they're meant to have, so even if Sonic does return Amy's feelings, how he's going to return them isn't going to be the Hollywood romance, we're going to have a long kiss moment. No, it's going to be he's caught sight of his next adventure, and he'll look back at Amy. No, she loves adventure as much as he does, and give her a wink to let her know he's going to chase the next adventure. And that wink is his invitation to say, keep up if you can. It's a challenge and an invitation and accepting of her into his life. And as she's an adventurer, that is literally the greatest gift Sonic gives her. And it's really, if you understand these two characters in this way, Sonic never tells her she can't come along. He never rejects her. He never tells her no. He does not refute her calling herself his girlfriend. He rolls his eyes at it, but he does not refute or deny it. And he never tells her she can't follow on his adventure. As such, by never hiding where he's going or what he's doing, or by allowing her to come along, he's an adventurer gifting another adventurer with the gift of adventure. And he is an adventurer, and Amy loves him in his entirety, which means she loves adventure and his way of life, which is what she's created as a character to do. And so this gift of adventure that he gives her, that's his reciprocation of her love. And it is so not traditional, which Hoshino-san was actively avoiding. He did not want to do what marketing said, which was to make her the Minnie Mouse to Sonic's Mickey Mouse. He wanted to subvert that and be truthful to Sonic's character and how his eyes are always looking forward to the next adventure and the next challenge. And so, that's why in my story, as I go into the final paragraph, that one line in here to where she just hopes nobody else catches up with Sonic before then is because she understands that to be with Sonic, you have to chase him. And she enjoys the adventure that comes with it, but due to my character Tempest, I'm purposely putting a shackle on her pursuit of Sonic, but also using it to develop her character and show still how Sonic shapes her, inspires her, influences her, and how her own dream of chasing him is what gives her her strength, how her desires shape her and gives her her initiative to act on her own desires. To me, these are extremely important things about Amy's character, and they get lost a lot of time for the obnoxiousness, or as talked about earlier in the stream, when Amy becomes in character the Pico Pico Hammer, rather than the character she is without it. And with that, though I didn't go into too much detail into the last paragraphs, that does bring my stream to an end. Well, not the stream itself, got a couple of more minutes. As at this point of the stream, when I reach the end of the story, I go back and run the Microsoft Word editor, see if I agree with the changes that need to be done. And it's a chance for me to give everybody a chance to ask any further questions before I wrap up the stream. And in the meantime, I will set things up to give us some music to listen to as we go into the final part of the stream. I'll just place it like there. I'm glad to see you enjoying yourself, Lord Conti. It's been a lot of fun getting to talk Amy. She is next to Sonic, She is next to Sonic, my singular favorite character in fiction. Sorry about that little interruption. The rest of the household starting to get up, so it is time to start wrapping up the stream here shortly. Let me just get through the grammar check, but if anybody has any further questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'm more than happy to respond to them before I wrap up. Oh, thank you so much, Lord Canty. I really appreciate that. I am very much looking forward to seeing her. And I just saw something I want to fix. I see her back to cleaning up. And there we go. The editor accepts my preferences, and the scene is done. And so with that, I will go ahead and switch us to the end screen of the stream. Advertise a moment that the next one is going to be next Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. At least I hope it's 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Time zones get so weird sometimes. It may end up being 8 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I don't know. I live somewhere where the time never changes. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Shout outs today to The Real Salties, to Mecca from the 80s, Lord Canty, Fraslot from Argentina. No, that's very nice to have someone from Argentina stop by the stream. Really appreciate it. Also call out to Lil Kiopsbro. Appreciate you stopping by. Means a lot to me. Thank you again, everybody, for joining the stream. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be looking forward to next week when I wake Tempest up finally and get him involved into the story. And also more properly introduce another OC, Nana the Hen. Until then, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next weekend. Until then, stay well.